in the world right now?
Sure. Yes. So I'm from the Bay Area, California, and let's see, I guess I did my bachelor's at SF State, ceramics, master's in Syracuse, New York, also ceramics, but very mixed media. I did a fellowship in Los Angeles up until now, where I've been in Denver for the past 3 years. So I'd kind of been bouncing around back and forth for some time now, but I feel like Denver's I'm happy I landed here. It's been a really welcoming place as far as the arts are concerned. And so just happy in that way. And yeah.
Oh, cool. It's exciting. Actually, did Ian McDonald teach at SF State, Gus?
I don't remember.
In the ceramics department?
Yeah.
No, so it was Jeff Downing and David Karoka primarily.
Okay.
And it was very much their program.
Okay.
And like some student teachers, but pretty small, very intimate, and very kind of a pure ceramic mentality, and very much sculptural. So I'll just show a little bit of my early works, and I think you'll see that very quickly.
Cool.
So were there other preliminary questions, or should I jump in?
No, jump in.
Okay, great. Well, let's see. Just get my screen share going here. Oops. And okay, are you guys seeing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so it just should be said, I'm just going to be talking through this. I can't really see you guys now, but if you have any questions, anybody, just jump right in. I'd be happy to address any ideas, questions, concerns, anything like that. And so to start off, these are some of my earlier ceramic work. These are about from 2012, maybe 2010 through 2012. And at SF State, this is very indicative of the ideas and the forms that I was working on at that time. And so they're all hand-built, hollow form, freestanding, about a maybe 1/4 inch thick at the thickest, largely paper clay. They're all fully glazed in underglazes, stains, and low fire glazes, and multiple firings. So there'll be usually at least 3 glaze firings for all of these. And so they're all one piece, except on the figure with horns. I think the horns were removable. But otherwise, like the seated figures on the animals, those are all one piece. And so a lot of this work dealt with ideas, things like interiority, kind of getting to this dreamlike space. There was this very like whimsical, like lost in the woods kind of feeling, and that to me feels very, very undergrad. And I love looking at these works, but they're not things I make anymore. And so moving on, this was also in undergrad, and so this was kind of stepping into this territory, thinking about different social factors that affect kind of identity or personhood or how we think about ourselves. And so these, I was calling them, there's 2012 people, I was calling them hipster deities. And so there's like one of DIY, there's one of obscure bands, and there's a deity of bike safety. And so they each are very high detail. The top part is one piece and the bottom part is one piece, and they kind of link together. And so I think a lot of this was about thinking so much about the different textures I can get with different glaze finishes, different tools and mark making, just really how you kind of get the eyes on these pieces, moving over the different pieces, going into these fine little ripples of wristbands, into the details of buttons, and I'd strung them with some guitar strings, so like kind of this material interest. So that's always been very, very at the forefront with my work, and very tactile. And so moving into grad school, I was still making figures, but I was taking a big departure from that. And so this was, these are 2 stills from a video that I called Spoonful of Sugar. And so with these, I kind of realized that my interest in figures was partially very based in the material and that tactile aspect, but also in this way of using kind of the individual as a way to communicate with others. So I think there's an immediate association when we see figures that I was always wanting to capitalize on, but then kind of expanding that to the point where now I'm the figure. I really wanted to transform myself. I do weird videos, but I'm actually pretty shy about it, so I need to be completely transformed. And so for these, I was I was eating spoonfuls of white refined sugar, just to the unlicensed song by Tom Tom Club, Genius of Love. And so this felt like a really big, I don't know if it was a breakthrough, but it was a big turning point. And it really got to the point where I realized that I'm interested in making something completely different. I'm interested in challenging myself. I know my comfort zone, and I've always wanted to push through that. And so this was my thesis work in 2015 from Syracuse University. And so this is called Happy Ending. And so this is all, I think you'll see very textural, a lot of colors, a lot of that kind of interest visually is still there, but this one was also scented. So what I'm holding is Clinique Happy. And this was a performative piece, so I would stand in this little, what I was calling like a plush pink kind of slice of dreamland as this, kind of not mythical, but it was, just this monolithic kind of blonde golden figure. And so I was reciting the tagline for Clinique Happy, their corporate catchphrases, and then just dispensing Clinique Happy, and like people would come into this little corner with me, and the whole gallery was like reeking of Clinique Happy by the end of it. And so I was really thinking about different modes of communication, like using material. And so engaging the senses was a big way to bring in that extra layer. Whereas once I was thinking, oh, well, if I have a matte glaze next to a high gloss, that's really going to, create a visual tension, and people are going to remember that. Well, no, I'm going to blast people with Clinique Happy. And that's what they're going to remember. And so another scented piece, this came, oh my gosh, years, 2016, 17 perhaps. Still, I'm always thinking a lot about kind of, I guess, symbols in a way, but codifiers of gender, of personhood, of power dynamics, and kind of associative aspects to that. And so my interest in materiality persists, and this one was kind of more or less inspired by finding this clear pink PVC material, and I've been using it for years. I love it, but these are stretched framed works. Pictures of orchids are sewn into them, and it kind of creates this transparent pink tunnel that you can look through, and underneath live orchids and mulch are planted. It's also scented as artificial strawberry, so you can see some car fresheners in there as well. And so this is starting to really get to this place where I'm thinking of, I work now very project-based. So with these, my kind of central ideas were revolving around strawberry milk and common phalaenopsis orchids. And so just taking these two elements, kind of exploring all of their associative meaning, and then taking that in, and then kind of letting it back out in different forms and modes and materials. This is from that same body of work. They're just shiny gold metallic tiles, a heat lamp, orchids sitting in strawberry milk. And so this kind of feudal aspect, or a feudal attempt of growing these, propagating orchids in strawberry milk. And I like the different layers, I like the textures and the scents. And so these two kind of things will keep coming back in my work, moving through bodies of work. And so my practice, though it's very project-based, I think you can't really get anywhere if you don't have lines of inquiry. And so when I say that, I mean lines of inquiry, conceptually, but then also just, I'm a tinkerer, I'm a ceramic artist. My hands always need to be working on something. And so even if I don't always know where something's going, I have main projects, I'm putting together shows and in that way, but also tinkering. And so these were kind of early tinkerings. And so there's little ceramic elements at the top, just super simple, you know, rolled out coils, folded over and glazed with like a goofy faux crystal glaze. And then into them, I started getting different color paracords, macrame pieces. These are gumballs that I've drilled through, colorful cord stops from like jackets and things that I'd ordered in bulk. And then they all end in sprinkles and cigarettes cast in resin that then kind of cap the ends of those cords. And so these things use different elements, a lot of found materials that I think people have different associations with. I think of these as being little ruminations on oral fixation, but there's always something kind of thinking about desire, and oftentimes that comes with the metaphor of sweetness. And so that's kind of the follow through in that is in the sprinkles. And so those led to other works, more of the stretched vinyl that I love, rivets, puncture through, and into that I've strung more gumballs on macrame. These ones actually end in glycerin soap molds cast in little chocolate shapes, but more sprinkles. And so piling on all of these colors, piling on different scents and associations is something that's been very interesting for me over the years. More recently, returning back to some performance installation, and then also with a ceramic element. This was a piece from a year or so ago called Birthday Girl. And so it was not my birthday, but I was really fascinated with kind of the cultural space allotted to birthdays. For example, if I were to tell you guys that today is my birthday, you'd almost immediately just, you know, like, oh my God, happy birthday. And then thinking about how particularly like in a party city, there is a girls' birthday party section. And when I found that, I was so fascinated. And so in these slides, you'll see these are ceramic. There's 8 slices that spell out birthday with these candles. I'd cast little letters. It's all vanilla scented. The wall, it's a 6-foot diameter wall of vanilla buttercream frosting with sprinkles in it. And then on the floor were different mylar balloons, doilies, blowouts. But really fleshing out this idea, trying to hit all of the senses, and then trying to bring my love of ceramics back into the forefront in a way, or like how can this incredible material, which anyone who's ever used ceramics that enjoys it knows it kind of has you for life. And so while I'm not rendering things in full figure form anymore, I still have this compulsion, like I'd love to have some clay in there. It just makes it feel complete for me. And so with this piece, I kept the candles lit as much as I could. I'd come in, light new candles, scented throughout the show. And I did get a few people to sing happy birthday with me at the opening. So that was fun. Moving on to Juice Cleanse. So these same kind of ideas that I've had that I've always had, move through my projects, move through my work in different ways. And so Juice Cleanse was looking at kind of self-help culture and the language of that, and how, I find that to be genius, but also perhaps a little deceptive. And so for this project, I went on a 7-day juice cleanse, which was purported to be, I think it was Kim Kardashian's favorite, so I replicated that. And then during that time, I took very detailed notes of all the food I was craving. And then I rendered those in ceramic. And so, and then the whole show was scented with essential oils, and then also using this kind of run-of-the-mill, very common imagery used to speak to kind of the spa space, which are these like little black stones, orchids again, running water. And so I really wanted to kind of push that idea, and it was really important for me to source a lot of these things on just through commercial forces. Like if it wasn't available commercially, it wasn't that interesting to me for this particular project. And so I did not make this little cigarette, this little camel blue cigarette box. I actually bought that. And so this is just assemblage put together, but it is ceramic. So there's that ceramics coming back in. This I did make, so sourdough loaf with apricot jam. I forget which day at what time I'd craved that, but that kept recurring. And so kind of coming into that, that poetic space, I'm using little yellow gems as a way to think about this, the lure of apricot jam. Nachos, that was a very real craving during that time. These are all ceramic, just a little white clay, with a template. I think I traced out a little tray, one of those little to-go trays, and then very thin slab cut out, slightly crinkled, and then glazed together nachos with just different glazes. One is a shot glaze and one is a, I think it's like the Dunkin' Crystals effect or something like this. Bagels and cream cheese. This was real life. But I just really enjoyed bringing ceramics back into this body of work in such a central way that is really playful. I had a lot of fun making it. I thought it was really funny, but that it also was serious and spoke to a performative aspect that happened prior to the exhibition itself, which is that I really did do this cleanse. And these really were the things that I wanted to eat. And so in doing so, it was fun because I was realizing that, when you're pushed to the limit, the foods that you consume, the foods that speak to you, it is a bit of an autobiography. So perhaps nobody else would crave exactly the same things that I did. I also had 20-piece chicken nugget. I also had corn dog. And then this was speaking to a bowl of pho. So I'm half Vietnamese, which I'm beginning to kind of think about, talk about, make work about more and more. But this is just a commercial bowl that I'd found, gold-leafed, as a few star anise. And then the show also had I'd had some oil painting in there. I'd had some mixed media works. This is a stretched fabric with fabric face masks cut out and then sewn in under this clear vinyl. So all very tactile, all using different materials to kind of triangulate that same idea, just to kind of roll it around in my hands and really figure it out. Miss Vietnam. This show this has been a really important show of the past few years. It's really changed the way I've been thinking about work and thinking about subject matter that I personally feel comfortable talking about. I just had not really been interested in what we may call identity work per se. I think it so easily can just become self-referential and stop relating to the world around it. And so I'd always kind of stayed away from it for that reason. And so these days I'm really trying to look it straight in the face and find, I don't know, what there is interesting to me. If it's not interesting, I won't come back to it. And so this was kind of the beginning of going into that. And so I'm using different materials that speak to this heritage that I don't have a connection to culturally. Raised very white, half Vietnamese. And so I have different elements, different artifacts that kind of help me process that here. And so these are 3 Vietnamese out-dyed dresses. They're sewn into vinyl, yellow wallpaper on the background. A lot of other found materials and things come into it, different imagery, souvenirs that I brought back from Vietnam, sewn into clear vinyl. Those are little, real crudely pinched bowl and spoon that I attached with rivets to this other piece. Thinking about food culture, thinking about this Vietnamese femininity that upon going to Vietnam for the first time in 2018, I kind of wanted to connect with that more. And so these are resultant of that. I also started to think about my favorite childhood candies, which were sourced at the local Asian grocery store in San Rafael, California, which was called Asian Grocery Store. And so in this little rice bowl with burning incense, there was these Pocky Sticks, strawberry Pocky. Botan rice candy and White Rabbit creamy candy were really important to me as a child, them being some of my favorite things and most coveted treats. And so there's just different elements that'll keep coming through, but we can see there's some Pocky here, a box, the interior lining, and then a piece of Pocky stick cast in resin, all fixed onto this yellow velvet, a Botan rice candy oil painting on this stretched fabric canvas. These interior windows kind of speaking to that interiority, speaking to that kind of inward gaze that I was always trying to kind of discuss, but not really figuring out how to get there in a way that was meaningful for me outside of just pure imagination. So this gave me kind of a bedrock to start to think about out of the experience of perhaps being an American, perhaps being many things at once. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you sit with it? And so just these there's a White Rabbit wrapper. That's one of the first times I'd sewn that into one of these fabric stretched works. Pocky, again, so this work is still up. This is in Colorado Springs. There's this artist couple, Ben Kingsley and Jessica Langley, and they have this space called The Yard, which is literally their front yard. And it's in this strange space of Colorado Springs, which is a lot of Army veterans. There's like a not naval base, oh my God, Air Force base there. And so they had these rotating exhibitions. They do 4 a year where you just install in the front yard. And so for these, I wanted to reference those Pocky sticks. And so these are ropes looped around a tree and then back taut into the ground, and then I had some encaustic wax painted on there that is colored, scented, and flavored as strawberry. So visually referencing that strawberry Pocky again, but really digging into material in a way that I can't describe it. I know it when it's right. I can feel it in my brain. It's like little dials start switching on, and I really do trace that back to this this tactile understanding that I've always had. Just this love of touching things, of feeling the density, of scraping your nail through something, of testing the moisture level, whatever all that is. It'll be there forever. And so a project that's successful for me really has to touch on those points. And so here it is at nighttime. It withstood, rain, snow, high winds, and now sun. It's actually still up. It was supposed to come down, but it's been extended a little bit. And then April 4th, Rocky Mountain PBS will be doing a feature on this piece too. So keep an eye out, guys. So also just working with this Pocky theme that keeps coming up and up again. Well, coming up because I'm intentionally placing it there to be more specific, and rendering in different materials. And so for these, I have these hand sewn stretched works that reference the commercial design of strawberry Pocky, in addition to another one of these windows, kind of thinking of interiority, thinking of the domestic space, and then lotuses, also referencing that crossed biscuit stick pattern from the box. And then on the floor before it, there are a bunch of little ceramic bunny figurines that are arranged on this kind of high shine gazing pool. And so these are slip cast. I didn't make them though, I could have, but this idea of including found materials, they're charged with everything, the life they've lived already, the associations that they have already. And the fact that they're on the commercial market, I bought these online. There's something about that transactional aspect that I think adds layers that I'm very fascinated in, thinking about how problematic it is to associate oneself and one's identity with a commercial imported product. I recognize the conflict in that, and I'm interested in it. And so these bunnies kind of reference that mass production in the way that slip casting can do so well, as well as those commercial forces and kind of transit lines. Becoming more, this is January. Is it January? Anyway, recent work. And so this red textile was sourced in Vietnam on my first trip there. I had kind of hoarded it for a couple years, not knowing what to do with it, not wanting to waste it or destroy it. But then I decided to finally stretch it out. So they're laid out roughly in the shape of the cloth. So this project is called whole cloth. And so from the one whole cloth, I'd cut it apart and stretched it, and then did some different work with paints, and then some little oil paintings. Then I'd also sewn those White Rabbit wrappers into that fabric, in addition to these ceramic planters. So these planters have imagery taken from White Rabbit, Creamy Candy, and then they're all just hand glazed on there, just not even under, they're low fire glazes, just low fire shop glazes, where I teach ceramics at a community center in Littleton, Colorado. And so, you know, it's just kind of fun. I really enjoy these. It's kind of coming back to this automatic muscle memory. These are just made out of slabs. One slab curls around, one slab on the bottom, and then I think I did actually extrude the feet for this, but I don't. Sometimes I just roll out a coil. But then being able to really authentically reference my interests, which is planters, and that kind of history of function and utility in ceramics very specifically, and then bring in these other ideas, kind of taking this imagery from these candies that have meant so much to me, but that are also a mass-produced item, and kind of blending those things together for a final result that I think is interesting. And so this is whole cloth too. This is the sister of that previous slides I just showed. And so this uses some of that yellow wallpaper. You may remember it from that Miss Vietnam show with the dresses. This then also has this bamboo trellis wallpaper from the previous slides. And then for these, so now these three, what were fabric, stretched fabric, I've actually made them in the same dimensions out of ceramic. And so that's all glazed. That's all low fire glazes on those. So it's a mirror image of, let's see, of this kind of row here. So then I mirrored that in ceramic, and then onto the ground before it, it's mirrored in actual mirrors, and then these planters that have strawberry pocky imagery glazed onto them lie there, and they're growing ivy, which perhaps would grow up and over the bamboo trellis. We don't know. So using these ideas, again, just trying to find different materials. It's always just for me, it's just a push to keep myself interested. If I'm not interested, I would never ask anyone else to be. I like to challenge myself. I like to make something I've never seen before. And so a big part of that is looking at what people are doing, researching, thinking, and then just letting my hands kind of go from there. And so this is a little glazed wrapper on there. And then you can see I'd decoupaged some of the actual wrappers kind of around the sides of them there. And so then on the right here is the actual fabric piece, and then I glazed that onto that panel on the left. And sorry about some of these pictures. The left is cell phone. And so that pretty much brings us to now. That is the end of my slide presentation. But yeah, are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was like amazing to see your work.
Thanks.
In the whole. I just want to ask you, so I want to ask you how you balance levity, like weight and levity in your work. Like, do you think about how you like kind of use like it's not really like it's humor, but not really. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Sure. So like maybe tone, yes, when you say levity. Yes. So I feel like I've bounced all over the place on this kind of idea of tone, because I need work to have a sense of humor in order for me to connect with it, and that might be something kind of visually humorous. But also, I think more and more the works that really speak to me, that keep me coming back, do have kind of layers built in. So there might be like on its face, something might be very playful. It might be fun, you know, oh my gosh, that's a candy. I've had that candy. That's so, like, I like that first initial connection, but then there are kind of built-in layers of engagement. And so I like to have all of that there. And so for me, it's a balance of making things that feel visually balanced and have this kind of material interest. I like to hit different sensory experiences. So I like things that you can imagine tasting. You might know what a piece of bubble gum tastes like, or you might know what strawberries taste like, or you've had strawberry Pocky, for example. So I like playing on those senses, and that kind of muscle memory, that association that so many of us have when you use found materials. It's just so easy to access that.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, it's like you get to get away with, you know, like like different layers, but it's almost like it's almost like you're afraid to laugh at the pieces, only because they're very, it's so serious, you know. And with the juice cleanse piece, I was thinking like, I was like, oh, look at, I mean, I thought you were talking about kind of the charlatan aspect of, you know, self-care and like getting involved in.
Yes. So that is a big part of it. I think there's a lot of social critique that comes in, especially with works like Juice Cleanse. And I think that's really just reflecting my experience and who I am. So I'm never trying to point a finger and blame somebody or laugh at somebody, because I see these things and I live this life and I do that too. Like, I'm putting on that green tea face mask. I don't know what on earth it's actually doing, but I'm going to do it. I like to, when I was thinking of that work particularly, there's a whole kind of new age health and wellness lifestyle, and that it's always been there. It just changes all of the time, like throughout the decades. And so I'm really curious about, in our current moment now, what that looks like. And so being exposed to these things, you know, I consume these things as well, and that kind of makes up how I'm then kind of reflecting back out on other people and on, I guess, just my experience. But I think it's important to kind of keep one vigilant foot, perhaps, in everything that we do. And so in that kind of dissection of personhood, that becomes very important for me. So whether it's accessing, you know, some memory that I had that helped me understand my cultural difference from all of basically the white people that I grew up with, or if it's, you know, wondering if I should drink pineapple juice for dinner because, you know, it's going to center my chi. Like, I think that same level of kind of awareness, measuring twice, cutting once, all of that kind of comes in. So it's, I think that's just, I like that as a layer too, so that there's this understanding of self, but then also this willingness to dissect.
I would like to just comment on like the tone of it too. Like what I pick up is like there like there's not, like, it avoids being like tongue in cheek in the way where it's like you get it or it's like in your face, but there's something humorous to me in a lot of the work, but then there's also like a very genuine like openness, especially the work that's sort of the later work that was more closely like about your specific identity. I thought it hit like a really, really nice balance there.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Tammy, did I cut you off though?
No, I was gonna, no, my one other question was about, can you talk about like your literal and figurative approach to like being holistic? Because you
Sure.
really, yeah.
Well, let's see. So my personal approach, or how,
I feel like
or
in
what?
your,
Sorry.
I feel like in a lot of your pieces, you, and even Jen from Brooklyn Clay, and Laura. Well, Jen says the work is so sensory, everyone has an additional connection to sense and flavors or memory of. And then Laura says the sensory experience makes it so accessible. And I was thinking, when I was watching the slideshow, I was thinking that it was really like a holistic approach, both on like a back to the self-care level, but also in the installation itself. So you're like
Yes,
both notes.
I see. Yes, a holistic approach to making the work,
Yeah.
perhaps. Yeah, and so I think that comes so much from staying busy, from having these multiple kind of things happening at once really helps me. And so just finding, I ruminate on things for a long time before I start creating something that I'm asking other people to consider. And so I think the kind of holistic, that organic approach renders itself in different ways, but it's really just trying to create something that pleases me. And I guess the holistic, it's hard to describe. It's something like when you've hit it, I can kind of feel, I kind of have a physical sensation of that.
Totally.
I was
Yeah.
sort of like wondering about your process as well, and like I would imagine that there's a pretty considerable amount of time that goes into like research and just thinking and like really nurturing a concept before you start making like one of those several objects that like creates the body of work. And you also mentioned, which I feel like people that make this type of work don't usually mention having like a need for like a tactile experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mention like how important ceramics has been. I was just wondering like how much time is spent just like in the preliminary work, and is that enjoyable for you, or do you find like ways to break it up through different processes like touching clay or making these different objects where you don't have to just be like in your head the whole time?
Yeah. So I think when the way I work, which process-based, I mean, I try to incorporate a lot of ideas and bring in concept in a way that is not, I don't know. I feel like it's like you said, so often like somebody working conceptually, like, imagine a chair. That's the
I think
piece.
this
Like
gets
I'm
back
not
to the
doing that.
tone too. There's like the way you're talking about the work is the way that, like from seeing it, like that tone course is coming through in it for sure.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, and so I mean, balancing ideas and materials is so much of my practice. And so I just really believe that materials themselves have so much importance, especially the way that I work with them. And so it's pushing materials to speak to me, and sometimes that's involves well, actually, I'm trying to bring this idea of shopping as artistic practice, because when using found materials, if you don't know what's out there, you can't use it. So so online shopping is big for me, and that's brings in that world of commerce and that whole language of advertising. And so I find that I fall prey to it, but then I also love to pick up its cues and I love to replicate it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's so prevalent in like self-help, new age healing and stuff. And so that's why I kind of love it. Like I'm obsessed with the idea of purification through a 3-day package. It's $18.99. We're going to ship it to you for free. You have never felt this light. And, you know, like I love this. So, so it's this genuine fascination, but also critique. It's what?
Can you send me a link to whatever product it is?
Yeah, I'm just going to Google Juice Cleanse, send you the first three links.
Marsha, do you know Amy SantaFerraro's work?
You know, I don't know that I do.
You could look her up, but I think you guys would just really bond over looking at found objects and just like scouring the internet for objects. But there's also just something so nice about both of your work that it's like made up of found objects and like really often like mass produced pieces, but then there are like these moments of just like such fine craftsmanship that sort of sneak their way in.
Yeah, I'm looking at them now. This is great.
So there's like all these plastic pieces, and then right next to it there'll be like a slip cast piece that you can't even tell isn't plastic really when you're like first walking past. But that was kind of like the nicest thing about this was I see your work a lot on Instagram and online, but getting to like stop and slow down and see those like little tags that you had like sewn into places, and just like little objects that had been reproduced, or especially the vinyl that had been like sort of sewn exactly around those things, is such a nice little touch. And it's so strange to see it with cheap objects like vinyl and like mass.
Yeah, I like that conflict. But yeah, this is making me think of this idea of skill. And I think especially with ceramics, especially right now, we're in this renaissance of people discovering the material and falling in love with it, which is great. But there's also a lot of this like a de-skilled aspect. And so it's funny because I'm so comfortable in the ceramic studio. I don't need to think. I just come in, I start recycling over here, I start rolling slabs over there, I'm building this other thing, you know, like it just, that is my rhythm. That's like my natural rhythm. But I also work in a lot of other materials where then I'm coming into this beginner space. And so it's really been challenging for me in this way to kind of, because my immediate sense when I see like a crack in some ceramic work or something awful, I'm just like, oh, unbelievable. Like glaze was too thick. No, but just maybe allowing space for the charismatic object. Because I think when authenticity is put into something, even without the full material background, I think you can tell. I think it's pretty immediate. That being said, I love seeing true skill. I love seeing time. And so I'm always telling my ceramic students, if it looks like it took a long time, it's because it did. And there's no way around that. So I try to bring that into all of my works where I'm also bringing in new processes, being a beginner, because that's always a place that I want to be. I always want to be on that crest where I'm still challenged.
Jen says, I really appreciate the incorporation of commercialized feminine cues.
Ah, yes. Great. Well, thanks for saying that. I mean, they're everywhere. So I also have a certificate in women's and gender studies, which is really just more reflective of my interests in decoding that, you know, I can't talk about someone else's sense of personhood. It's always going to be drawn from my lived experience. And realizing that I'm not the only one that's been raised in this society and culture, and that these forces affect all of us sometimes incredibly insidiously, not always harmful, but sometimes subconscious. It's just so interesting to me. So that's always been a source of like renewed kind of investigation, these cues that come from everywhere. Yeah, so that's good noticing.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions?
No, I loved seeing your work. It was fantastic, especially where I love the new stuff and where it's going. I'm really excited to see what happens next, especially since you have so much time to sit at home and shop online.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I've been kind of struggling because I've been so unproductive during this time. Like I have things at home I've been wanting to embroider. You know, I can do flat work, works on paper, and I've just mostly been in the garden, in the kitchen, and on Netflix. But now, online shopping, that's right. That is gonna go easy on myself because I have been doing that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Marsha.
Yeah, thank
this
you
was
so
great.
much.
It was nice.
Great, yes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Laura says thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, well, everybody, keep your hands clean, stay healthy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.